Currently, Earth. On the 17th of June in 1579, Sir Francis Drake claims California for the Queen of England. In 1579, on the 5th of June, Sir Francis Drake and his ship, the Golden Hind, briefly made its first landfall at what is now South Cove, Cape Arago, just south of Coos Bay, Oregon, and then sailed south while searching for a suitable harbor to repair his ailing ship. On the 17th of June, Drake and his crew found a protected cove when they landed on the Pacific coast of what is now Northern California. While ashore, he claimed the area for Queen Elizabeth I as Nova Albion, or New Albion. To document and assert his claim, Drake posted an engraved plate of brass to claim sovereignty for Elizabeth and every successive English monarch. After erecting a fort and tents ashore, the crew labored for several weeks as they prepared for the circumnavigating voyage ahead by careening their ship, the Golden Hind, so to effectively clean and repair the hull. Drake had friendly interactions with the coast Miwok and explored the surrounding land by foot. On July 23rd, when the ship was prepared, Drake and his crew left New Albion, paused his journey the next day when anchoring his ship at the Farallon Islands, where the crew hunted seal meat in preparation for the return voyage. On June 17th, in 1775, British General Thomas Gage lands his troops on the Charlestown Peninsula overlooking Boston, Massachusetts, and leads them against Breed's Hill, a fortified American position just below Bunker Hill. As the British advanced in columns against the mighty American army, General William Prescott reportedly told his men, "Don't one of you fire until you see the whites of their eyes." When the redcoats were within 40 yards, the Americans let loose with a lethal barrage of musket fire, throwing the British into retreat. After reforming his lines, Gage attacked again with much the same result. Prescott's men were low on ammunition now, though, and when Gage led his men up the hill for a third time, they reached the redoubts and engaged the Americans in hand-to-hand combat. The outnumbered Americans were forced to retreat. By the end of the engagement, Patriot gunfire had cut down nearly 1,000 enemy troops, including 92 officers. Of the 370 Patriots who fell, most were struck while in retreat. The British had claimed victory on the so-called Battle of Bunker Hill. Breed's Hill and Charlestown Peninsula fell firmly under British control. Despite losing their strategic position, the battle was a moral builder for the Americans, convincing them that patriotic dedication could overcome superior British military might. There's an opinion that the British entered the Battle of Bunker Hill overconfident. Had they merely guarded Charlestown Neck, they could have isolated the Patriots with little loss of life. Instead, Gates had chosen to try to wipe out the Yankees by marching 2,400 men into a frontal assault on the Patriots' well-defended position on top of the hill. The British would never make the same mistake again. 383 souls continue their eternity as a result of this battle. On June 17th in 1876, the Sioux and Cheyenne Native Americans scored a tactical victory over General Crook's forces at the Battle of Rosebud, foreshadowing the disaster of the Battle of Little Bighorn 8 days later. General George Crook was in command of one of the three columns of soldiers converging on the Bighorn country of southern Montana that June. A large band of Sioux and Cheyenne Indians under the direction of Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and several other chiefs had congregated in the area in defiance of U.S. demands that Native Americans confine themselves to reservations. The Army viewed the tribe's refusal as an opportunity to dispatch a massive three-pronged attack. Crook's column, marching north from Fort Fetterman in Wyoming Territory, was to join with two others. General Gibbons' column, coming east from Fort Ellis in Montana Territory, and General Terry's force coming west from Fort Abraham Lincoln in Dakota Territory. Terry's force included the soon-to-be famous 7th Cavalry under the command of George Custer. The vast distances and lack of reliable communication made it difficult to coordinate, but the three armies planned to converge on the valley of the Bighorn River and staged an assault on an enemy whose location and size was vaguely known. Like most of his officers, Quick was convinced that the Sioux were encamped in a large village somewhere along the Rosebud Creek just east of the Bighorn. Also, like most of his fellow officers, Crook believed that the Native Americans were more likely to flee than stand and fight. He was determined to find the village and attack before the Sioux could escape into the wilderness. Crook's allies, 262 Crow and Shoshone warriors, were less certain. They suspected the Sioux force was under the command of Crazy Horse, a reputable war chief. Crazy Horse, they warned, was too shrewd to give Crook an opportunity to attack a stationary village. At least 1,500 mounted Sioux warriors caught Crook's soldiers by surprise. With 2,500 warriors in reserve, Crazy Horse had secured a victory. Fortunately for Cook, one segment of his army was not caught unprepared. His 262 Crow and Shoshone allies had taken up advanced positions about 500 yards from the main body of soldiers. With astonishing courage, the Indian warriors boldly countercharged the much larger invading force. They managed to blunt the initial attack long enough for Cook to regroup his men and send soldiers forward to support his Indian allies. The fighting continued until noon, when the Sioux, perhaps hoping to draw Crook's army into an ambush, retreated from the field. Crook had no choice but to withdraw and regroup. 8 days later, they would join with their tribesmen in the Battle of Little Bighorn, which would defeat George Custer and his 7th Cavalry. The exact number of eternities continued from the Battle of Rosebud are not recorded. There are different numbers in different accounts. On June 17th in 1885, the dismantled Statue of Liberty, a gift of friendship from the people of France to the people of America, arrived in New York. The statue was delivered in 350 individual pieces, packed in more than 200 cases. The copper and iron statue, which was reassembled and dedicated the following year in a ceremony presided over by our 22nd and 24th President Grover Cleveland, became known around the world as an enduring symbol of freedom and democracy. Intended to commemorate the American Revolution and a century of friendship between the U.S. and France, the statue was designed by French sculptor Frederic Auguste Bartholdi, who is said to have modeled the statue after his own mother with assistance from engineer Gustave Eiffel, who later developed the iconic tower in Paris bearing his name. The statue was initially scheduled to be finished by 1876, the 100th anniversary of America's Declaration of Independence. However, fundraising efforts, which included auctions, a lottery, and boxing matches, took longer than anticipated both in Europe and the U.S., where the statue's pedestal was to be financed and constructed. The statue alone cost the French an estimated $250,000, more than $5.5 million in today's money. Finally completed in Paris in the summer of 1894, the statue, a robed female figure with an uplifted arm holding a torch, reached its new home on Bedloe's Island in New York Harbor on June 17th in 1885. After being reassembled, the 450,000-pound statue was officially dedicated on October 28, 1886, by President Cleveland, who said, "We will not forget that liberty has here made her home, nor shall her chosen altar be neglected." Standing more than 305 feet from the foundation of its pedestal to the top of its torch, the statue, dubbed "Liberty Enlightening the World" by Bartholdi, was taller than any structure in New York City at that time. The statue was originally copper-colored, but over the years it underwent a natural color change process called patination that produced its current greenish-blue hue. In 1892, Ellis Island, located near Bedloe's Island, which in 1956 was renamed Liberty Island, opened as America's chief immigration station, and for the next 62 years, Lady Liberty, as the statue is nicknamed, stood watch over more than 12 million immigrants who sailed into New York Harbor. In 1903, a plaque inscribed with a sonnet entitled "The New Colossus" by American poet Emma Lazarus, written 20 years earlier for a pedestal fundraiser, was placed on an interior wall of the pedestal. Lazarus' now famous words, which include "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," became symbolic of America's vision of itself as a land of opportunity for immigrants. Some 60 years after our 30th president, Calvin Coolidge, designated the statue a national monument in 1924, it underwent a multi-million-dollar restoration, which included a new torch and gold leaf-covered flame, and was rededicated by President Ronald Reagan on July 4, 1986, in a lavish celebration. Following the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, the statue was closed. Its base, pedestal, and observation deck reopened in 2004, while its crown reopened to the public on July 4, 2009. Today, let's remember how awesome the French are in their pursuit for liberty and freedom with the American people. On June 17th, in 1953, the Soviet Union ordered an entire armored division of its troops into East Berlin to attack a rebellion by East German workers and anti-government protesters. The protests in East Berlin began among construction workers who took to the streets on June 16, 1953, to protest an increase in work schedules by the communist government of East Germany. By the next day, the crowd of disgruntled workers and other anti-government dissidents had grown to between 30,000 and 50,000. Leaders of the protests issued a call for a general strike, the resignation of the communist East German government, and free elections. The Soviet forces struck quickly and without warning. Troops supported by tanks and other armored vehicles crashed through the crowd of protesters. Some protesters tried to fight back, but most fled before the onslaught. In Washington, the 34th President, Dwight D. Eisenhower, declared that the brutal Soviet action totally contradicted the Russian propaganda that the people of East Germany were happy with their communist government. He noted that the smashing of the protests was a good lesson on the meaning of communism. America's propaganda outlet in Europe, the Voice of America radio station, claimed the workers of East Berlin have already written a glorious page in post-war history. They have once and for all times exposed the fraudulent nature of communist regimes. These criticisms had little effect on the Soviet control of East Germany, which remained a communist stronghold until the government fell in 1989. It's estimated that between 15 and 20 souls continued their eternity as a result of this event. In more recent events, today I'd like to remember the 9 souls who continued their eternity on June 17th, 2015 in Durham, North Carolina at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Righteousness is the only sustainable force in the eternity. Righteousness is what we all must eventually and completely encompass. Righteousness is the path to the most powerful and auspicious form of yourself. All historic information documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com and wikipedia.org.